Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jay from Jade Productions. Wow, that was really loud. I hope you did not have headphones in. I'm sorry. Seriousness thing today. We're going to be taking a look at the new FAQs that all came out. I'm not going to go over them all. That would take forever. I've just made some cliff notes here about some changes, what most of them address, and what you should go check out in your own time, and a few things that I found interesting. And we'll also take a quick look at the points changes that they've introduced in these FAQs, as well as some of these new confirmed match play rules, as well as some other rules changes that are very important for you players out there, as well as the new proposed beta rules and suggestions for organized play, and what they could possibly mean for Warhammer in the future. And most of what they means that my half of my collection sort of gets screwed, so I have to completely rebuild. But that's fine anyway, because one of those armies is still waiting on a codex, so there's always time to change it up. Alright, so the first thing we're going to jump into is we're going to do the new match play rules. So, for a little while they had the beta rules about Smite. Now, each time you cast Smite, it starts at Warp Charge 5, and each time you cast it, it would go up by 1. The new Smite rule has it the same thing. In addition, unless your Smiker is attempting to manifest Smite, has either the Brotherhood of Psykers, so a Grey Knight unit, or Brotherhood of Sorcerers ability, see Thousand Suns, you must add 1 to the Warp Charge value of Smite for each attempt, and for each attempt to that has been made, whether successful or not. That's annoying. To manifest Smite to a maximum value of 11. So you can always still get it off on a 12, in which case not only do you perils, but you also do d6 wounds. Yay! I hate that. I hate this. I really do. I don't think Smite was as broken as everyone thinks it was. I don't think it was that bad before, to be honest. The armies that used Smite and relied upon Smite and Smite spam to get anywhere needed it because they were armies that relied on it. Now, given 2 of those armies are actually still right here and A-OK, they're fine. Thousand Suns desperately rely on Smite, and it's good to see that they're going to keep their reliance on Smite. It's not going to hurt them as much, because what more do you need? Oh, you're only doing 1 mortal wound now, and you're getting consistently harder? Sure, it's the army with the most buffs to the Psychic phase. Every other Psyker is jelly, but at the same time, come on, it's their main weapon. In an army that really lacks heavy weapons outside of tanks that their cost efficiency ratio, I'd rather just spam more mortal wounds. A point that I discussed this with T, my partner on this channel with, is he's most annoyed that this doesn't apply to Demons of Tzeentch. The Chaos God of Magic is consistently screwed over every edition when it comes to magic. Funny that. It mostly makes things that cast on a d6 horrors! Completely trash, and they were already really shit in terms of their psychic powers anyway. So, that's the first one. The second one is targeting characters. Look, I feel like they screwed this up from the very beginning of 8th edition. The intention was nice. I liked what this did. It made, since it's separate, it was a nice thing. I liked how it was in the beginning, but it did cause the occasional, are you seriously telling me I can't target that guy over there because you literally have a character who's like half an inch closer and engaged with my dudes. So my only eligible target is the guy currently in combat who I can't target. These new rules clear that up. So now, an enemy character with a wounds characteristic of less than 10 can only be chosen as a target in the shooting phase if it is both visible to the firing model and it is the closest enemy unit to the firing model. Ignore other enemy characters with a wounds characteristic of less than 10 when determining if the target is the closest enemy unit. This is exactly what it was always meant to be, I think. This is what it was always meant to be. Their beta rules were a little bit unclear on what they were trying to change it to, but this was always the intention, I think, and I'm A-okay with this. it actually does considerably harm one of my armies, my Space Wolves, but that's because they were built in 5th edition and designed around a concept of Hero Hammer, and I took that into 8th edition, and this worked ridiculously well with it, and meant that my Hero Hammer was a pain in the ass to deal with. 10, what are they called? 10 Lone Wolves, dropping down with Thunder Hammers and Storm Shields, backed up by a host of supporting characters of every possible nature to give out all the buffs, really is a thing of, pure rage if you can pull it off. And, it doesn't work as well as it did before, but it still works pretty well. Then again, Space Wolves, they might be seeing me changing pretty much how I play them in the future. Mostly because of stuff I'll discuss later on in this video about some of their other things. Other than that, the new targeting character rules, I like them. I think they were always how they were meant to intend to be. Will they change how we play? Most definitely. This actually should have come a lot sooner, and I think if we had this a lot sooner, we wouldn't have the restrictions on commander battle suits. When I still think they've gone around what they've done with Tau commander battle suits by restricting them to 1 per detachment. I don't mind this 1 per detachment. I think that's fine. I don't think it would have been necessary if they weren't so damn points efficient, and if we had this beforehand, so that when people like me were fighting other people who brought 9 commanders and just continuously swap them in and move them across the board in a giant brick and immediately move ones that got injured into the center where I couldn't harm them, and kept, the guys with, just kept them like half a mil, in front of each other to restrict targeting so I couldn't kill the ones with the weapons that were hurting me the most. Yeah. I rambled there. I'm very sorry. But, character rules. It's there. It's fine. It's all good. There's been another thing. There's been some, facts and erratas to the main rules of Warhammer 40k 8th edition. One of the most pertinent ones, I do have some cliff notes on all the facts that I've gone through and drawn up the most important ones, and I will just cover these immediately after I'm done with this. But some of the most important ones that every player needs to know right now is about the more command points. As of now, people who build a battalion detachment now have +5 command points instead of +3. Awesome. I love command points, I love stratagems, and it always feels a bit, I'm really pressed for how many I've got, and you've got to be really careful with how you use them. This gives a lot more allowance, but it also makes armies that, farm. It has its ups and downs. The second part of this is it changes ones that can build battalions to have +12 instead of +9. So, with just being Battleforged, 5, 6, 7, 8... a lot of the time, I'll be pushing that to 9 command points in the way I tend to build my armies, because I tend to take at least one of the other detachments when I'm building a battalion. That's just me. And the armies I own, and it was a thing to do before now. I still think it's going to be the thing. Just more people are going to have lots more command points to play with, which is really cool. It opens up players to use more of a special element in their codexes that is there, but not so used because it's more of a precious resource before this FAQ, that you had to spend them really wisely and had to really wait your opportune time to use them. And they were make or break things sometimes, and sometimes they were just really good things that just helped you stay in the game a little bit longer, but you had to be super careful. So this has an ups and down. Firstly, the downside of this, armies that can farm CP, Imperial Guard, first among them, and it's the one that everyone is going to go to when it comes to this. They can farm command points really, really well. There are a couple other factions that can farm command points just as well. They're out there. Their names escape me, because I'm literally trying to think of the armies with those rules. Everyone's got rules to let them farm command points, but I don't think anyone's got the amount as the Imperial Guard can. So, nay for that. That's shitty. The guys who farm command points can now farm even more. Eldar are one of them. Right. Yep. I just forget because I don't actually farm command points with my Eldar builds. I'm a bad Eldar player. I have not adapted to the new edition well. That is a lie. That is a lie. It's all because I refuse to play Alteok and refuse to take Autarchs. It's okay. That's a discussion for another time. So then we've got the upside of this is that armies that are super reliant on stratagems, or armies that have really mediocre stratagems, now have a chance to sort of make use of them in a better way. Armies like Admech and Death Guard definitely spring to mind. This is funny because they are two armies that I own, so no wonder they spring to mind. But they're an example of Death Guard has very few stratagems. They're all very situational, and a few of the good ones can only be used so many times, and there's a real restriction on that previously. And this will lighten that up a little bit. Let them use their very important but much more expensive stratagems that, they typically wouldn't use ever previously, and let them use them, such as the 2CP healing. That's suddenly now, I can use that a lot more often now. I can heal and bring back my dead guys. I'm suddenly much more swole than I used to be. Then you've got Admech, who rely stupidly so on their stratagems, and need to be able to get as many stratagems as possible to be able to do this, and previously your best bet was just to build a brigade. Now you can build a battalion, and that'll be a-okay. 9 command points with a, whichever, the spearhead, which, I will subsequently fill up with as many Onagas as I can. Yes. So it's very good for those armies, and armies like them, because it gives a lot more chance to actually make use of stratagems and a huge section of these books, rather than just sort of sit there and go, I could, but I can't, I need to save it later. So that's that. There's an errata here about ignoring wounds. So, some abilities, such as the Death Guard's Disgustingly Resilient, the Warlord trait that lets you ignore damage on a 6+, and a couple of things. When this first started to roll out, and it started with Death Guard, and they even mention here in the FAQ about when you combined Tenacious Survivor with Death Guard's Disgusting ability, Disgusting Resilience, Disgusting ability. They're all disgusting. That they were able to, you take the damage, and then you would roll all your 6+s to ignore it, and then you would roll all your 5+s to ignore it, which would increase your chances of ignoring damage altogether much greater. And, this new ruling here is kind of makes sense. It's something that you had from 7th edition, where you had lots of multiple Feel No Pains flying around as well. Feel No Pain being the term older players use, since it's that rule recycled. And essentially just says, if you have multiple rules that let you ignore damage, then you just take whichever one is best. You don't roll them all, you just pick the one that's best. So if you have a 5+ and a 6+, you just take the 5+ and roll all your ones there to ignore damage. So that's a-okay. That's pretty much what I've been doing with the Death Guard as is, but I haven't played a lot with the Death Guard lately, because I'm still trying to get them prepped for battle in a 2,000 point arena. Those of you who know my videos will know well and truly why I'm not able to use the vast majority of my Death Guard collection. There's been some... Alright. So, that brings us to one of the ends of the main thing. So, now I'll quickly just cover points changes that they've done. So the points changes in the facts and erratas are all gathered under the FAQ for the 2017 chapter approved. So, here they are. Sly Marbo is now 65 points. Okay. Feculent Gnarl Maws are now 85 points, and... yeah. I'm pretty sure they've always been 1 to 3 units. 1 to 3 models per unit. 85 points. I think that's an increase. I am not sure. I'm pretty sure they were 80 points before. So, yeah. The real losers of today are the Tyranids and the Dark Eldar. Yeah, it's... sorry, not the Dark Eldar. Sorry. Disregard that. It's the Craftworld Eldar. My Eldar. Not my partner's, T's, Eldar. He plays Dark Eldar, I play Craftworld. The real losers today in terms of points are Tyranids and Craftworld. Games Workshop really, really hates Eldar right now. and I don't get why. They're not what they used to be, and people just complain about them endlessly, even though they're not that great anymore. So Dark Reapers are now 12 points without their gear. They cost about as much Terminator when you put their gear on them. So for toughness 3, 3-up armor, hitting on 3-up, you know, for the same cost of a Terminator, you're getting something 5 times as squishy. That's fantastic. Farseers have gone up a little bit in points. That's disappointing to see. They were fantastic because they are our main source of good psychic powers, and they're already restricted by a whole bunch of other rules. Spirit Seers have gone up to 65 points. That is ridiculous for a very shitty model, and a very shitty unit coming from a Craftworld player. Warlocks have gone up to 55 points. 45 points was really expensive. 45 points was really cheap. 45 points was really cheap. That being said, you sort of needed them this edition to make your Craftworld army perform anywhere near what it needs to, especially if you're like me and can't roll dice for shit. This points increase, will it affect me and how I field my Warlocks and how I always take a Supreme Command detachment with, 3 Warlocks? No. No, it will mean I have less of something else. Warlock Conclave. Funnily enough, these guys are now 45 points per model, and 2 to 10 in a unit. It's cheaper per model for something that is, realistically, half as effective as the regular one in terms of psychic power and support, and twice as effective in terms of sheer shenanigans and durability. So, Warlock Conclaves, give themselves a hand, you guys. The people who run lots of those, you're the real winners. But then again, that's also not the Warlock Conclave on bikes, so. Ravenwing Dark Talon, I think that is the flyer, I do not know. I think that is the flyer. Is now 180 points, not including its war gear. Tyranids. Biovores are now 50 points apiece. Why? No idea. I asked T about this. I asked myself about this. I looked at the codex. Why? 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 Hive Tyrant with wings, 190 points without war gear. Well, that's because Hive Tyrants were ridiculously good. And they listened to the community response that says, don't limit them to be 1 per faction. 1 per detachment. That's bad. That's bad, GW. Don't do that approach anymore. You did it once with Tau. Once is enough. Okay, Space Marine characters. Robert Gilliman is now 400 points. Still not expensive enough. Astra Militarum units. Commissar is now 15 points. And a Lord Commissar is 30 points without their war gear. Well, considering how absolutely terrible they are, that's a fair price. Fire Raptor gunship. 280 points. Well, if you're taking a Fire Raptor gunship, I think you deserve to pay that amount without their war gear, since that thing is terrifying. The Chaos one is also 280 points. And then Death Corps of Krieg. And those make their Death Corps of Krieg commissars the same points cost as regular commissars. That was interesting. And there's a few other things in there in chapter approved concerning stratagems, quantum shielding, uplink Markalite. Read it yourself. It's not super interesting and not super relevant. Okay, now I'm just going to quickly run through my notes of everything I took going through the other FAQs. And they're in no particular order. I just opened them up in order they were on and just ran through them. So the Tau are mostly cleaned up with the wording of a few of their rules. Nothing is super surprising in their FAQ. The fact that the experimental weapon stratagem to reroll the number of shots, I think that's the one to reroll number of shots, has to be used before you roll is stupid. Absolutely stupid, and makes that stratagem worthless. I was in favor of that stratagem and how useful it was. Now it's worthless. Necrons. There were a few cleanups on the Necron stratagems, and they remembered to make the Catacomb command barge actually hover now, so you don't measure from its base, you measure from its hull. this poor Catacomb command barge, they cannot get it right on their first go. The first time they published rules for this Catacomb command barge, they left out the character keyword. Ay. A few other things, like the Catan don't give a shit about the range when it comes to their powers. They can be locked in combat. They can be anything. There's nothing stopping those things from shooting out mortal wounds out of their collective gas clouds unless you kill them dead. Triarch Stalkers don't benefit from their own rule for rerolls if you basically shoot their guns one at a time. The Eldar FAQ. For Craftworld Eldar, I need to be way more specific when I refer to Eldar, I'm getting them confused way too often. For Craftworld Eldar, there's a brief explanation that when you buy a pair of Ghost Swords, you're really just paying the points once. So you pay the points for the Ghost Sword, and that gives you 2 of them. So that's good. You don't have to pay the same points cost twice, otherwise those things would get really expensive. A couple other things to bring them in line with other armies that share keywords and stratagems and so on and so forth. Really only important if you're running Eldar Soup, and even then it doesn't do anything except explain really what you already knew about running Eldar Soup if you were probably running them. And then it just clarifies that quicken units can advance if you do quicken them. Sweet. For the Dark Eldar, there's a little bit more cleanup in some of the wording. Not super massive changes. The multiple warlord stratagem that lets you select other warlords, lets you select other HQ units, a succubus or a homunculus if you've got an Archon as your warlord, and lets them have warlord traits, can now only be used once per battle. That's fine, once is probably enough, otherwise it would just be... Oh man, I'm imagining Hero Hammer. I'm a real fan of Hero Hammer, just to dick people around sometimes. It's not a good strategy, it's just funny. They do clearly explain in the questions and answers section how to properly use the Void Raven bombs, and that when you go to do the dice roll, you pick one of the other types. So for all the monsters and vehicles, you either roll, or for all the infantry, you roll. So you pick one or the other. Something about, there was something in there about Osvectors doing mortal wounds and carrying over. They don't. And there's a bit of a clarification on what was the intended reasoning and usage of the raiding force. So for those of you who don't know, and those of you who do know, the raiding force special rule is something for the Dark Eldar, which added them a new way to field their detachments. And how this basically worked was, if you fielded 3 separate patrol detachments of Dark Eldar, then you, instead of having +0 command points, you would have +4, which meant that you would have almost a little bit more than, just a little bit more than a battalion. Originally, that doesn't apply now with the new changes to battalion. And if you had 6, you gained even more command points. And their reasoning behind this, and something they talk about in this FAQ, was that basically the 3-1, the fielding for 3, is completely A-OK for matched play. It's designed for you to be used in matched play and tournaments and the likes. The 6 detachments, they sort of talked a little bit about how it was sort of more intended for people doing narrative and open play to do that kind of thing, with the 6 of them. Not really intended for the matched play. Whereas the smaller version is. So, sure. For the main rulebook, there's a couple of things that here that are very important that I picked out. There are a lot of changes, then some are minor, some are not. Some may affect you depending on others, depending on how well you know the rules. But for the main Warhammer 40k rulebook, the FAQ and errata there are a couple of things I picked out that are pretty important. 1. Embarking units that, when you try to embark on a transport, all models in the unit must be within 3 inches of the transport. None of your guys can be out there, so the whole unit's got to be able to make it to within 3 inches when you move them and then get on the transport. That's important for people who use lots of transports. Shooting, this is really funny. I found the clarification on this is funny. If you are in cover and you are in melee with an enemy unit and you both have pistols and you shoot your pistols at your enemy in your shooting phase while you're sitting in this terrain piece in cover, they get cover against your pistol attacks. And if they do the same thing, you get cover against your pistol attacks. It's not super important, but I found it hilarious nonetheless. You only need, when you're shooting at stuff, you still only need to see one model and you resolve all your stuff. There's clarification on the partial visibility of enemies and how you fire at them. There's some charge clarifications, to do with charging and fly. So, units with fly ignore vertical distances for charging. And, when you're, charging up ruins and through terrain and stuff, you do actually need to have your model physically within 1 inch of an enemy model in order to actually fight. Other than that, if you haven't read through a lot of the FAQs in the past that have been released prior to this big update, then a lot of the older FAQ rulings that were in individual codexes that address things that came up have sort of just been rolled into this one in a more general, broad statement. So, things that came up, such as adding movement, adding modifiers and modifiers increasing your movement to ridiculous amounts that came up with Tyranids, has now just been rolled into this general FAQ for the main rulebook about that, okay? So, if you haven't read all of the FAQs as they've come out, it's now all been rolled into one place, into one FAQ, into one document for you to look at. For the Imperial Guard, there was a hilarious errata that I lolled at in that heavy weapon teams, whether they be veteran or regular, now count as being equipped with grenades and lasguns. Yay! Grenades and lasguns for everyone! Actually, that's pretty good in my opinion, because it means if you move, you don't have to bother wasting the, fire of your heavy weapon. I mean, you probably should be snap shooting your heavy weapon anyway, but hey! Lasguns! Everyone loves a lasgun. Your super heavy tanks, Baneblades, can only fire their bolters and flamers at enemies that are within 1 inch of it. Everything else has got to shoot at something else. And that's got to go with, along the lines of some of their other stuff. Now, the most important thing about the guard one involves the stacking of orders. Now, I didn't take notes on how the order stacks according to Games Workshop. Instead, I am just going to read directly from the FAQ, which I've got up here on my screen, and tell you how it works. Because it's not something I could adequately describe. So, the question was, how do the laurels of command and superior tactical training interact? For example, my warlord is a Cadian company commander, and I give him the laurels of command and the superior tactical training warlord trait. How many orders is he potentially allowed to issue each turn, and how many units can these orders affect? So, basically, those two abilities allow you to order multiple units, and units that you've ordered to have their orders affect another unit nearby, and then on 4+, you can issue a second order, and shit like that. You could stack orders unreasonably high for stuff that you're actually technically supposed to only be able to use once. So, here is Games Workshop's answer on how you properly stack your orders. Guardsman players, I'm going to read this slowly for you so you can get it through your heads in case you haven't already. If he issues an order to a Cadian infantry unit within 6 inches, Unit A, using his voice of command ability, first, roll a dice for superior tactical training. On a 4+, you can pick another Cadian infantry unit, Unit B, within 6 inches for that order to effect. Then roll a dice for the laurels of command. On a 4+, he can issue a second order to the first unit, Unit A, and can then roll again for superior tactical training, and on a 4+, you can pick another Cadian infantry unit within 6 inches for the second order to effect. This does not have to be Unit B, but it can be. Note that when you are using superior tactical training, an order is not issued. Rather, an already issued order affects an additional unit. So you cannot use the Laurels of Command to generate further orders as a result of using superior tactical training. But you can use superior tactical training to make secondary orders caused by the Laurels of Command affect an additional unit. This took a lot of practice when T and I first whipped out our Guard Codex and subsequently put it away because we realized, holy shit, they're really powerful. And we love the Guard. We just don't like to play them down at tournaments. We like to keep the Guard solely to narrative play. But this gives you the proper way in which you're supposed to stack those orders. So if you're if you're a player and your army build revolves around this, just consult this. It's there. A to B, how you do it. That's good. I like that. That's the only really important thing in that Guard Codex, in this Guard FAQ. Next, for the Orcs, there's a minor change to mob rule. I'm sorry, Orc players, you consistently get screwed. It's okay. I love the Orcs too. I'll be starting an Orc armies one day. Probably not soon though, not until the Codex. This slight change is basically you cannot use a character's leadership like you could in the Index. Now, only the models in the squad and nearby squads within 6 inches. Sorry, I had a little issue there speaking for a moment. Basically, how it worked before is you could either use the number of models in your Orc unit as your morale stat, or you could use the number of models in a nearby Orc unit within 6 inches as your morale stat, or you could use the morale stat of a nearby character within 6 inches. Now, there's no character in the mix. Now it's only the number of models in your unit or the number of models in a nearby unit. I'm very sorry. Then again, you are probably want to run more boys anyway. Only models in squads, yep. The WA ability just has its wording with clarification. It affects bikers now, the WA ability. And there's a couple of clarifications in the FAQ about charging with boys and charging with storm boys and a bit about how that works. Index Imperium 2, just in general Index. Psychic Fortitude has now been renamed to Psychic Fortitude from Psychic something else to Warp Charge 4. Rules for taking Assassins and Sisters of Silence in detachments is in there, so if you like to run those, there's now rules for them and a couple of other armies like them, where they have no HQ units, where you can put them in detachments and you can ignore the mandatory HQ tax as long as the overall army of your warlord has the Imperium keyword. And then there's more clarification at the bottom of the FAQ about shooting at Colexis Assassins. In other words, only basically how it works out is everything is shooting the Colexis Assassin on a 6+, unless they have a special rule like Dark Reapers that says they always hit on a 3+. Which makes them the single greatest unit for killing Colexis Assassin ever, since that is their primary defense. The AdMech. There's a lot of stuff in the AdMech one, and as an AdMech player, I can tell you that nothing is actually surprising. Nothing in the FAQ came as a surprise to me. Nothing that AdMech players didn't already probably know, but there you go. The most important thing is that it ends the so-called debate, I thought it was pretty obvious, about whether or not Shroud Psalm confers cover, since you just benefit having him being cover, and whether or not ignores cover weapons. Ignore that. Basically, yes it does, you idiots. So, and, yeah, there's a few things like, static Psalm code doesn't extend, your healing, repair aura. Duh. Though, disappointing, but duh. And then changes to Scryer Skull, the stratagem, which make it still not great. You're still probably not using it. Moving on. Space Marines. Cherubims let you have a do-over with special ammo stratagems like flak missiles and hellfire rounds and so on and so forth. That's the only really new thing in there. Chaos Space Marines, there's slight changes to chosen equipment. Go see it yourself. Basically, from the looks of it, I didn't go through it with a fine-tooth comb and compare it to my chosen, just because I'm lazy in that way. And I have lots of other things I really should be doing right now. But it looks like it mostly resembles what their equipment options were in 7th edition. There was a thing in there that there's a stipulation added to the Recycling Cultists, the Tide of Traitors. Everyone's favorite stratagem that lets you just throw wave after wave of massive 40-man blob, or 20-man blob if you're a much more reasonable person, of cultists at your enemy for 1 CP. It can now only be used once per battle. Lame! Lame. That pisses me off as a Chaos player. That is ridiculously stupid. I can only bring in sacrificial pawns who literally will do nothing but die and make my opponent feel good about himself once per game. I hate this. I hate this ruling. I hate it a lot. I hate it. So, most of the other questions revolve around the abuse of Noise Marines, and a couple other things of if you like to have demons in your army, but you don't like the idea of them screwing with your chapter tactics and legion traits, well, they don't screw with your detachment rules if you just summon them. So, there we go. And there's a couple explanations on the particulars and in and out of the Chaos Boon table. Inari, GW hate you. Get over it. They're now less punishing to take, it's now less punishing to, take actual Inari armies, since you'll still be able to use the stratagems from Eldar, Dark Arda, the relics, the psychic, all that stuff. You won't be able to benefit from the detachment rules, slightly less punishing, but overall, GW does really hate the Inari, and the FAQ shows it, since every time they touch it, they seem to make Soul Burst worse. So, there you go. A couple of NIDS things, nothing major, changes to Alien Cunning and Enemies Below rules. Everything else is there's nothing really major in there. Thousand Suns had no major changes, just a few explanations and fixing. Death Guard Demon Princes can now take Plague Spewers, Poison Flamers on things that can reroll every poison weapon they've got with their Warlord trait. Yes! That makes me consider buying a Demon Prince. And I hate demons. But, awesome. There's clarifications that confirm pretty much what most Death Guard players were doing with their Death Guard armies as being right, in terms of how you use certain psychic powers. And there's some explanation on how Morty works. And pretty much zero shit's given on what that actually says, because to be honest, it's how I've always played him, it's how I've always read the rules, and sweet-o. Now it's confirmed that Morty is very killy, not very tanky. Get over it. Other than that, it really doesn't say anything that you probably already didn't assume just from reading the rules. Demons, the Demons Codex and their FAQ now confirms how much damage the stupid Plague Bearer combo does, where you stack the banners and all the powers and abilities and shit. And basically, they do 4 damage apiece. Sweet. There was a slight thing in there about your plague trees, your feculent gnarlmauls now have to be set up within 6 inches of each other if you buy them in units. Pro tip, ladies and gentlemen. Don't buy them in units. Buy them individually. And then the Index Marines does nothing but reignite my love for Damned Legionnaires. God, I hope there's a codex coming soon, because it just basically does what Index 2 does for Imperium, and lets you just bring the Damned Legionnaires into detachments along and ignore the HQ tax, so long as your overall warlord is an Imperium model. That's the crux of it. Definitely go check these out yourself if you're unfamiliar with the stuff and you want to read exactly what's changed. Those are just a couple of cliff notes and highlights about things I'd spotted going through them. I don't have really time to go through all of them. That would take me forever, and this video would be hours long. And I really do need to actually get to work on other stuff. So, hurrying along. These are some new guidelines for organized play that GW is suggesting. And I will remind you before, what I'm about to read out will inspire a lot of hate, because it inspires a lot of hate in me, because there are some new beta rules and some new suggestions for organized play. Firstly, organized play. The GW have put out this thing that for organized play, you should probably, maybe follow these sort of guidelines. And it goes, for points limit games of up to 1,000 points, players should be allowed to have up to 2 detachments per army, and each data sheet, so each unit can be included up to 2 times. And then, it's got stuff like battlefield size and game length. That's not important. For 1,001 points to 2,000, it says you should be able to have 3 detachments in your army, and you should be able to include up to 3 of the same unit in your army. And then it's got the same thing for 2,000 to 3,000 points, where it's 4 detachments and 4 of the same unit per army. And it's got a stipulation here that the limits of the number of times you can bring a unit does not apply to troops or dedicated transports. I will never participate in a tournament that uses these rules. Why? They are... Okay, I'm trying to hold in swears. They are terrible, ladies and gentlemen, and they suck. And I feel very strongly on this. I do not like that. I can stomach you've limited me to field 1 commander per detachment for the Tau. Cool. I will have 3 commanders instead of 9. And that just forces me to build the rest of my army differently. Fine! No. What this does is it says an army with a really shitty loadout of units available to them, add mech! And others, like them, who are super reliant, Thousand Suns! On very specific units to get work done and really need to take a lot of them, can't do them. It will screw more armies than it helps. Because the good armies, they don't care about this. It's the bad armies that are already struggling and where the majority of the players playing those armies complaining about come from. When the day comes that I am restricted to fielding 3 Onagas maximum in my entire army from my AdMech, I will just walk out. That is not a game worth playing. No. It is stupid. It's stupid, and it will absolutely change how every army, not only I play, but how every army everyone else plays. Yes, there is an argument. There is another side. I'm not completely corn red on this. I understand why it's here. I understand the reasoning behind it. It's there to help promote different list building and to sort of represent the rarity, as they call it in this FAQ, of other units. And let's face it, I agree. But that should be reflected in a unit's points cost, not in as many times as I can take them. I'm already, This is where it comes. I do a lot of work for... I do a lot of analysis on stuff that is tournament play. I have a good understanding of tournament play and meta. I despise playing in it under most circumstances. So, and a lot of people I play also don't play that super cheesy stuff. So I understand why it's here. I'll never play in a tournament that uses rules. I just want to stress out to everyone, though, that these aren't official stuff for matched play, so don't even bother with them unless your tournament and your tournament organizer says this is how you're doing it. In which case, either do the tournament or don't. I personally hate it because it forces me to change so many. It's stupid, but I'm not going to rant on about it anymore because it's really inconsequential when you think about it. The real big things come from these new matched play beta rules. Now, the thing about these beta rules and what scares me about them is that they're most likely to, in some fashion or another, come into play. later down the road. Probably at the next big FAQ, probably in chapter approved. So, the first one is funnily entitled by GW. They have a great sense of humor. That soup is off the menu. So, for those of you who don't know, a soup army is a term you use for when you have an army that is all united under one generic keyword, such as Chaos, Imperium, Eldari, Inari, or Tyranids. These are big keywords that belong to a lot of different codexes in this game, and a soup army, typically in competitive tournament play, just takes the best units from everything that has these keywords, sticks them into one army, into maybe one or two detachments, and then curb stomps everything, at the sacrifice of a few special rules, but normally it's worth it for the amount of sheer stupidity and power you can unload on your enemy. Now, it was some of the stuff very early on in 8th edition last year at a couple of tournaments where the winning tournaments were Chaos Soup, or things like Imperium Soup, were doing very, very well, and Eldari Soup. Tyranid Soup, I've actually never really seen that done. I would love to see that done. I would love to see people take full advantage of Genestealer cults more. I'd love to see Genestealer cults be massively huge across the player base, because I love the idea of them as bad guys. Sadly, not going to happen until they get a codex. But, does soup concern me? Soup doesn't concern me. Because the actual rule of this, the actual wording of this beta rule, and it probably won't survive in this wording, if it ever comes to fruition, is all of the units in each detachment in your Battleforged army must have at least one faction keyword in common. In addition, this keyword cannot be Chaos, Imperium, Eldari, Inari, or Tyranids. I'm fine with this because I already play like that. I already try to build my armies thematically. And I don't like Games Workshop forcing thematic armies down our throats, because not everyone does that. Everyone deserves the right to play the way they want to play, which is the brilliance of Games Workshop's current approach. At the same time, it's only for match play. And it's got a very easy workaround. It just adds slightly more tax to your soup. You still have soup, you just have more tax. And you know what? If you're going to soup out, what's the harm in paying a little bit extra tax? I mean, you know, you're trying to take the best of everything. You know, that's obviously not going to work. So it bridges the divide a little, I think. I don't so much care about it. I think, will it change personally how I or most people I know play? No, not really. Will it change my local circuit? No, not really. Will it change my narrative campaigns? Nah. Just ignore that. It's narrative. Will it change how I build for tournaments? Will I change the advice I give to T when he goes to tournaments? No, not really. It mostly affects the smaller armies and the cheesemongering armies. And you know what? Just don't do that. There are other ways to win. But really, there's workaround. So, it doesn't matter. A better first turn. Okay, Games Workshop. This is addressed to Games Workshop, and this is my opinion on this. This new beta rule that they've introduced, under the title of a better first turn, which the actual thing is beta tactical reserves, it's a change to current tactical reserves. I hate it. I absolutely fracking hate it. Now, there's an argument, before I get into this. In Warhammer 8th edition, there are a couple of tactics. Some very popular tactics involve around a first turn Alpha Strike. Now, the first turn Alpha Strike swings in one of two directions. It's either a first turn, shoot your enemy off the board, or it's a first turn, swoop down, get in your enemy's lines, and then tie up their guys and try and cripple them in melee. And it goes one of these two ways. And your Alpha Strike will either have you doing buggery, or it'll have you wiping them out. Most of the time. A lot of the time, a reasonable army should be able to do damage and cripple key units, but not flat out, wipe you off the board. In fact, that's a lot of the way this actually goes in my experience. A lot of the times, a first turn Alpha Strike, if you're playing at the top of your game and you're prepared and you're aware of this strategy, a lot of the time, and it's the reason screening units exist, is that, someone's going to get the first turn. Whoever gets the first turn is going to have a huge advantage. It's just how the game works. Regardless of whether they're shooting you or dropping down from tactical reserves to assault you, doesn't matter. Because either way, whoever's going first is still going to cripple the units of the other guy. And they're going to put the other player on the back foot. And the other player is going to have to work hard to come back from that. And it happens. It's how the game runs. So, the change to this rule does nothing but to punish players and armies with very particular play styles. So the current tactical reserves is you can set up to half your army in off to the side of the table, provided they have a special rule that lets them do so, or you pay the command points to let them do so via a stratagem or some other way, and then you can bring them down at the end of any of your movement phases 9 inches away from an enemy model. Now, that's a gamble, because 9 inches is not a great charge. You can make it more reliable with rerolls, and you will if you're being serious, or you'll have lots of units doing this. But other than that, you're looking for a 9 on 2d6, or closer to it. Well, yeah, you're looking for a 9 on a 2d6 because you have to be further than a 9, so you technically have to be 10 in the bit. So, it's already a gamble, right? And it's already the only way that some armies have to actually get their good units, and some armies are completely reliant on this tactic to actually be viable in the game. Now, this new rule says in matched play, now, even, most people play by matched play, even if you're a narrative player, a lot of the time you'll consider matched play stuff. But matched play is predominant, I think. And it's the important one because it's what people like to play, because they like the points and stuff. But discussion for another time. What this does is basically you can't deep strike. I'm paraphrasing here and summarizing this special rule. It's pretty long. I suggest you go look at it. It's basically on your first turn, you can't deep strike anywhere, so you can't bring your guys down from off the table anywhere outside of your deployment zone on the first turn. So, not only can I not bring my guys down near the enemy lines to try and take the fight to them and buy time for my other guys to move up and claim objectives, I can't even jump down on my first turn in the midsection of the board to try and grab objectives, or isolated objectives. No, I have to wait till turn 2, by which time, and this is a common fact for those players who know Warhammer 8th edition, by which time most of my army is probably dead, because Warhammer 8th edition goes pretty much one way. By turn 3, most of your army is probably dead, because shit dies in this game really fast. That's just how the game mechanics work. Shit dies really fast, it is bloody, it is brutal, and after about the 3rd or 4th turn, depending on how well you've gone, it then becomes a slow bit of a grind. It becomes a bit of a slow grind, right? Not being able to claim objectives in the first turn that are farther up the board and really hard to get, because, the Maelstrom cards that people use for objectives, or, objectives that are placed in all over the board, it can be really hard to get to without some mobility, and this effectively, a lot of armies rely on this form of mobility, not transport, to be able to do stuff. And it cuts the legs out from underneath them. For me personally, this would change how I field my Eldar. It would change how I field my Space Wolves. It would change how I field... Actually, it wouldn't really change how I field my Death Guard, since my Death Guard I mostly use the Deep Strike and Tactical Reserves defensively. As for other armies, well, Dark Eldar were the new hotness. They're a fantastic new army. This cuts the legs out from underneath them. Given they have certain units that actually do want to wait until the third turn cut off, by which time if you don't bring your guys in by the third turn, they get murdered. Of course, the issue with this rule is because I can't bring them down first turn, the enemy, the opponent player, has a chance to move all of his big massive blobs of lots of guys up the board to stop me from getting anywhere on the board, forcing me to maybe deep strike in my own place anyway. So in other words, it becomes completely useless. If I can't use this to gain a mobility advantage, it's completely useless. So then you've got, armies like demons. Yes, bloodletter bombs are bad, but they're also mostly one use because they require a lot. They're very thing, and you can be prepared for them. In fact, you should be, if you're playing a demon player. Demons are not fast. Demons are medium speed for anything that's not Slaanesh. Tzeentch is probably mid. Definitely Khorne definitely needs this kind of mobility to be able to tie up enemies while the rest of his army marches up. Because if not, and I've seen from the index what happens when a Chaos Demons army, particularly Khorne or Nurgle, isn't able to put down something up the field to try and distract me while the rest of his army comes at me and marches up the field for 2 turns. The answer is, I gun it down and he leaves in maybe an hour by turn 3, by which time he's got nothing left but a few peons. For Tau, one of the key strategies behind Tau players, it's a very common strategy, it's a strategy that has existed forever, and it's a strategy that got better this edition with the new reliable form that it's, Deep Strike doesn't move, it's actually reliable, that you can choose when they come in and stuff. But you come down within a medium range or close range, and you hit your enemy, you hit some of his key units to try and disable or cripple some of the stuff that's going to tear you a new butt. And you do this with your short-range guns, because your guns are stupidly short-ranged for a shooting army. This is just talking about Tau and Eldar in general here. Not so much Dark Eldar anymore, funnily enough. And it was a key thing, and you had to do that, because if you didn't, your guys would often be turned into very bright confetti. Figuratively, the models don't actually turn into confetti. Just imagine, if you will, the enemy pulverizing you with big guns before you even reach them and turning you into brightly colored confetti. For armies that have the durability of a strawberry cheesecake, the Eldar, all Eldar, it is a crippling blow not to be able to get in fast because we have really short-ranged weapons. It doesn't just affect melee armies either. So it cripples Tau armies, which have entire builds around drop in, try and do as much damage, and then try and run away from the counterattack in case we fail. It's a gamble, and, that's part of the game. You've got to take a tactical gamble. Sometimes it'll pay off and the dice will work in your favor, sometimes it won't. But this rule cuts the legs out away from some of these. And I hate it, and I hope this never gets implemented. I don't like this at all. And I'm hoping many of you will agree with me. Yes, it has its upsides. I mean, sure, you don't have to suffer someone, deep striking and charging and tying up your guys and getting really lucky and destroying your entire army. But then again, You should have been prepared for that. It's no excuse. It's part of the game. You should be prepared to take a blow first turn. The game operates on one of two principles. There are shooting armies, which, on the first turn, if they get it, they'll shoot the hell out of you and try to cripple you. Close combat armies do the same thing, except they drop down, charge you, and try and punch you to death and cripple you. You should be prepared for either one. It's that simple. Saying that it's unfair that armies can, drop down, charge, cripple you, lock up your shooting, is no excuse. You should have some sort of... that's part of the challenge. You need to outthink that. You need to be prepared for that. It is a strategy game, damn it. I'm rambling on this for way too long. I'm sorry, everyone. I am so sorry. It is a very frustrating thing, and it changes the way so many armies would have to operate, and it changes the game so drastically that I don't like it at all. I don't like this at all. It would cause broad sweeping changes to not only the entire meta, but it wouldn't fix anything. It would only make certain things worse, and it would make, GW from the outset of 8th edition, I forget where they said it, but they've wanted to make every army feel viable. They wanted to make every unit feel viable, and they wanted to make every army feel good and thematic and powerful in its own right. And they've done a pretty good job of this. There aren't very many trash units. There aren't very many trash armies. There are slightly weaker armies that needed maybe a bit more work in the design phase, but they're still competent. They can still win games. But this rule takes that philosophy, shreds it, and flushes it down the toilet. In my opinion, at least. There may be others, and I would love to listen to differing opinions on what other people think this rule, if it's enforced, if it makes it out of beta, could possibly do for the game. I think it does nothing but make certain armies completely crap. On top of this, it doesn't affect infiltrators. I'm just going to put that stipulation right there. You should definitely go read this rule. It's there on the Warhammer community website. It's one of the first articles. I get where they're going for. I get the thinking and logic behind it. I just don't think it's a very good idea. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I've been Jay from Jade Productions. I've rambled on for so long here, much longer than I intended to. I got really fired up without realizing it about talking about these beta rules, especially the Tactical Reserves one. I look forward to playing with them at least once or twice to, make sure my theories are valid and sound, but right now, on just a general tactical and strategical scale, they just don't work. But, please, talk to me in the comments about it. I'd love to hear what your thinking is, and let me know about it, and what you guys think of this whole FAQ and all the other erratas and FAQs that we mentioned. Until the next video, I will see you around. Yeah. Take care, mates. Alright. Signing off.